Yes, please.
Lena Guber, Ukrainian informational agency, FinClub. You told that Ukraine will maybe recover this year. Why do you think so, besides the reforms which can do or cannot do new Ukrainian government? And does it mean that EBRD and other investors will invest more money in Ukrainian economy this year?
Can I perhaps pass this question to your direct neighbor, Dmitry, who is our expert on this?
Thank you very much. You saw that there was one slide on Ukraine, and that slide basically showed that in the last 2 years, basically when Ukraine entered into the crisis, it was facing a very significant imbalance, external and internal imbalance, in terms of the trade deficit, the current account deficit, and in terms of the fiscal deficit. What we have seen in the last 2 years, basically in 2014-15, was that the current account deficit went down to close to zero, to some extent driven by the slump in the domestic demand, and also there was a very significant effort to decrease the fiscal imbalance, the budget deficit, largely because the government addressed the issue of the quasi-fiscal losses in the energy sector in terms of reducing the deficit of the Naftogaz. So the adjustment to a large extent happened in the last 2 years. There was a cost to that adjustment, and the cost to the adjustment is 70% of the depreciation of the currency. The GDP in dollar terms went down from $185 billion to close to $90 billion now. The GDP per capita decreased, so the economy sort of reached the trough. Now the only way forward for us, frankly speaking, and this is our baseline scenario, the peace scenario, is that the economy is going to start to rebound, and we are seeing the signs of the sequential rebounding starting from the second half of 2015. And this rebounding continues as we speak. So our baseline for Ukraine, is positive, is very low positive. On the reforms and on the structural aspects that you mentioned, I can tell you that despite certain political uncertainty, and the change in the government, we have seen all the key political actors working together to push forth with the critical, macro-critical legislation in the energy sector. There has been a very significant effort to improve the functioning of the banking sector. Close to 70 banks have been liquidated, so there is this very significant process of the overhaul happening in the banking sector. So this is a structural aspect to it. And compounding the impact of these adjustments, macroeconomic, plus the structural reforms, and of course there are many other reforms that need to be done that leads to our forecast of low positive for 2016 and 2017. Ukraine is the second biggest country of operations of the EBRD. Basically, last 2 years, our annual business volume was close to 1 billion euro, which brings it second to Turkey only. Turkey is the biggest country of operations. So yes, we do that. And that's for public sector operations and also for private sector operations, which means that there are, despite this adjustment, which is ongoing, there are bankable opportunities in the private sector as well, in the real and financial sector.
Let me add, though, that EBRD has been very committed to investing into reforms, and that is reforms in the energy sector, reforms in the banking sector, reforms in the state enterprise sector. And therefore, our ability to invest is also somewhat constrained by the environment for reforms and by the willingness of other and private investors to go forward. The uncertainty, the political uncertainty of the first 4 months of this year have not been very helpful in this regard. And we are very unlikely to be able to match the performance, our investment performance of last year in this year. So we invested, as Dmitry said, about €1 billion last year. We're very unlikely to be able to match that performance.